Rain streaked down the tall glass windows of the billionaire's mansion as the poor maid stood trembling at the door to his private study, clutching a soaked note in her shaking hands. She wasn't supposed to be there. Maids didn't interrupt billionaires mid-meeting. But her heart pounded with a warning she couldn't ignore. "Sir, please," she whispered, eyes glistening with desperation. "Don't go to that meeting tonight." The billionaire, flawless in his tailored suit, looked up from his laptop, amused, dismissive, yet faintly intrigued by the terror in her voice. He'd built empires on logic, not superstition. But why did this poor maid, who barely spoke above a whisper, look as if she'd seen death itself? What could she possibly know that his billion-dollar advisors didn't? And what secret in her trembling warning could be powerful enough to change everything he thought he knew about his own fate? Rain trickled down the edges of the grand estate, washing over the marble steps where echoes of laughter had long faded. Inside, the scent of money still lingered, even though the house felt colder than the frost outside. The maids moved quietly, their eyes lowered, their whispers softer than the hum of the chandeliers. Among them was Clara, a young woman with gentle eyes, her hands calloused from scrubbing silver that once reflected her father's face. Years ago, this was her home. Now she cleaned it for wages. Every corner she polished carried a memory. Her mother's laughter echoing in the corridor, her father's voice telling her never to bow her head. But now bowing was all she could afford. Her world had become one of repetition. Rise before dawn, polish, serve, vanish into silence. Yet something about the house's new master unsettled her. Daniel Hart, the billionaire who had bought her family's estate 2 years ago, was a man wrapped in calm danger. Everything about him screamed control, his voice steady and smooth, his steps calculated, his eyes the color of winter steel. But there was something beneath that veneer, loneliness perhaps, or a wound too deep to show. The staff spoke of him like a legend, a man who'd turned ruin into empire. But Clara knew that money had a sound, and in this house, it whispered rather than sang. That night the storm rolled heavier than usual. Clara stayed late, scrubbing the main hall's marble floor when she saw movement through the rain-streaked glass. A figure stumbling near the gate, collapsing against the wrought iron. Without thinking, she dropped her bucket, ran through the front door, and sprinted into the downpour. The wind clawed at her hair as she reached the man slumped by the gate, his clothes drenched, his body trembling. Sir, can you hear me?" she cried, kneeling beside him. The man's breathing was shallow, his face streaked with mud, but his eyes, when they flickered open, held a strange, deliberate focus. She half carried, half dragged him under the archway, pressing her own threadbare jacket over his chest. The world around them blurred into rain and heartbeat. She didn't stop to think that helping a stranger might get her fired. She just couldn't let someone die on the same ground where her childhood once danced. "Stay with me," she whispered, shaking him gently. "Please." His lips moved faintly. "Don't tell anyone I'm here." His voice was hoarse, but his tone carried authority, not fear. Clara frowned but nodded, helping him to the servant quarters. She found an empty cot and wrapped him in blankets, lighting the small heater nearby. As the hours dragged into dawn, she sat beside him, her eyes tracing the dirt on his face. Something didn't fit. The curve of his jaw, the careful cut of his nails, the faint scent of cologne beneath the grime. He didn't belong to the streets. Yet she dismissed the thought. The world had taken too much from her to allow wonder anymore. When the first light crept through the cracked blinds, she noticed his breathing steady, the faintest peace softening his features. She smiled weakly, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. For once she'd done something right. Something human in a place where kindness was as rare as sunlight. Later that morning, as she stepped into the kitchen, she overheard the head maid whispering to another servant about an emergency call from the city board. Mr. Hart was furious. His meeting had been delayed. Clara froze, the name striking her heart like lightning. She thought back to the man in the servants' quarters, his tone, his presence. No, it couldn't be. But as she carried a tray toward the east wing hours later, her steps halted. There he was, standing near the window, his back straight, his hair neatly combed, his suit flawless once again. The beggar she had saved was her billionaire boss. Her heart dropped. The tray trembled in her hand, silver rattling softly. He turned, their eyes meeting in silence heavy enough to drown the storm outside. Neither spoke. His gaze held a flicker of something she couldn't read. Guilt, curiosity, or perhaps respect. She lowered her head quickly, whispering, "I'm sorry, sir," before retreating. But that night, long after the house had gone quiet, he stood in his study replaying her trembling voice from that moment at his door, when she had begged him not to attend the meeting. Her warning echoed in his mind like a prophecy. He couldn't understand why her words haunted him, or why he couldn't ignore them. But deep down, a truth he didn't want to face was beginning to stir. Perfect. Here's scene 2, around 800 words, continuing directly from the last moment. It deepens Daniel and Clara's tension, unravels hidden backstory through flashbacks and foreshadowing, and keeps the tone cinematic, emotional, and realistic, no subheadings, just immersive flow. That night the rain eased, leaving the air thick with silence. Daniel stood at his study window, staring at the reflection of a man he could no longer recognize. For years he had worn confidence like armor, billionaire, investor, visionary, but tonight the image staring back at him looked almost human. He could still hear her voice, soft yet trembling with conviction. Please don't go to that meeting tonight. He should have dismissed it. He'd built his empire on numbers, not instincts, and certainly not the fear of a maid, but something about her eyes, how they glistened like the sky before lightning, had unsettled him. He found himself pacing, his mind a storm of reasons and doubts. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe curiosity. Either way, he canceled the meeting. Hours later, as he poured himself a drink, his phone lit up with headlines. Fatal crash on Highway 17, CEO and 2 executives dead. The same route he was supposed to take. The same convoy. His glass slipped, shattering against the marble. For the first time in years, Daniel felt the tremor of mortality crawl under his skin. He turned toward the window again, his reflection blurred by raindrops. The maid's trembling voice echoed in his mind like a haunting refrain. Who was she? The next morning he found her in the garden, pruning roses with hands that bore quiet strength. She didn't look up when he approached. She merely said, "I didn't mean to frighten you, sir." Her tone was humble, but her posture, straight, grounded, betrayed something deeper. He studied her for a moment, then asked, "How did you know?" She paused. "I didn't," she said softly. "I just felt something was wrong." "Felt?" he repeated, half smiling, half incredulous. "You expect me to believe that?" Clara lowered her gaze. "Believe what you wish, sir. I only did what I thought was right." He should have dismissed her then, turned away with his usual indifference. But the sincerity in her voice disarmed him. For the rest of the day, her presence lingered like a ghost in every corridor. He caught glimpses of her polishing silver, her movements quiet, graceful. Once he found her standing by the old family portraits that hung in the East Hall, portraits he'd purchased with the estate, never realizing their sentimental weight. Her fingers brushed one frame lightly, her expression unreadable. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He poured another drink and walked through the dimly lit hallways. The mansion creaked like it remembered every secret ever whispered within its walls. Passing through the corridor, he stopped at the same portrait she had touched earlier. A family frozen in a happier time. A man with proud eyes, a woman with warmth in her smile, and a little girl with a red ribbon in her hair, her grin bright, untouched by sorrow. The brass nameplate beneath the painting read, "The Whitmore Family." He frowned. Whitmore. He'd seen that name before, in the old sale deeds. The Whitmores had once owned this estate before the recession swallowed their fortune whole. The little girl. The realization struck him like lightning. Clara Whitmore. He exhaled sharply, pressing a hand against the wall. The poor maid who now scrubbed his floors was the daughter of the very family who had built this home. The woman who once belonged here was now his servant. He turned away from the portrait, his chest tightening. The truth burned in his mind like a confession he didn't deserve to hear. He thought of her warning again, how it had saved him, and for the first time shame clawed at his composure. He, the billionaire who had built a fortune on foresight, had been blind to the humanity beneath his own roof. The next morning, he found her in the servants' corridor, preparing trays. "Clara," he said quietly. She froze, the sound of her name in his voice startling her. "You used to live here, didn't you?" She stiffened, then nodded slowly. "A long time ago. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed anything?" Her tone was calm, but there was an edge of pain beneath it. People like me don't get to speak of what we've lost, sir. We just keep moving. He had no answer. Her words hung between them like smoke, bitter, undeniable. Later that evening, Daniel dismissed his meetings early and walked alone through the garden. He thought of the mansion's grandeur, the deals that had built it, the power he wielded, and how empty it all felt now. Every rose he passed seemed to carry her quiet resilience, every raindrop a reflection of the humility he'd long forgotten. Inside, Clara finished her chores and slipped into the servant quarters. Her hands ached, her back burned, but her mind replayed the look in his eyes. Something had shifted. She couldn't explain why she'd warned him that night. All she knew was that a feeling stronger than reason had urged her to act. Maybe it was memory, maybe destiny. In the quiet of her room, she opened a small box hidden beneath her cot. Inside was an old photograph, her parents standing proudly on the mansion steps holding her as a child. A tear slipped down her cheek. The world had taken her home, her family, her dignity, but not her soul. She had promised herself that. And somewhere across the mansion, Daniel stared out at the storm returning beyond the horizon, unaware that the greatest tempest of his life was not in the market or the boardroom, but standing right there in his own house, holding a truth that could break or redeem him. The following days were tense and silent, though neither Clara nor Daniel spoke of the truth that hovered between them. In the grand estate, wealth shimmered in crystal chandeliers and gilded frames, but in those hallways, it felt hollow, like a stage set without actors. Daniel found himself observing her more closely, the way she moved through rooms with quiet dignity, the way her hands lingered on the family portraits, or how she paused at doors she had once opened as a child. Every glance at her pulled at a hidden corner of his conscience, but he kept his distance, part respect, part fear. One evening, the mansion buzzed with preparation for an exclusive gala. Daniel had invited the city's elite, intending to showcase his power, yet his mind kept drifting back to Clara. He wandered into the servant quarters under the guise of checking arrangements, catching her folding linens by the dim candlelight. She looked up, startled, her expression carefully neutral. "Sir," she whispered. "Clara," he said softly, not wanting to startle her further. He stepped closer, his voice quieter than usual, almost confessional. "I can't stop thinking about that night. About your warning." Her eyes widened slightly. "It was nothing, sir. I just acted. But it was everything." He hesitated. "You saved me. And I realized something else tonight. I've been blind for years." Clara's heart thumped in her chest. She wanted to flee from this sudden vulnerability. This man whose presence could crumble or comfort her with a single glance. "Sir, please. It's over," she whispered. But even she didn't believe it. Daniel reached for the photograph she kept hidden beneath her cot, the one of her parents standing on the mansion steps, arms around her. This was your home." His voice cracked slightly, though he tried to mask it. "And I didn't know. I walked through these halls thinking I'd built something new, but maybe it was never mine to command." Clara turned away, hiding a tremor of emotion. Memories flooded her. Running through these halls as a child, her mother's laughter, her father's stern but loving warnings. Then the night her world collapsed. Bankruptcy, strangers buying the estate, her family scattered. She had returned here as a servant, invisible in the rooms she once called home. And now, the man standing before her, the billionaire who had bought her past, was talking to her with a raw honesty she wasn't prepared for. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "I need to know something. How did you survive after everything?" His question wasn't just curiosity, it was an unspoken acknowledgement of the cruelty of fate. Clara's gaze met his, unwavering. "I survived because I had to. Because even when the world took everything, I couldn't take from myself what truly mattered." Her voice softened, almost a whisper. "Kindness, pride, my heart." He studied her, realizing she had what he had spent decades trying to buy: integrity, resilience, and an unshakable soul. And yet a question gnawed at him, heavy and insistent. Why had she warned me that night? It wasn't just instinct, it was as if she knew. That evening, Daniel walked the garden alone, the storm now a distant murmur. Memories of his own past, of privilege and expectations, came flooding back. He remembered the childhood lessons drilled into him by parents who valued power above humanity, strategy above love, He had learned early that weakness would be punished, that vulnerability was a liability. Yet here was Clara, a woman with nothing, risking everything for someone she barely knew. She had intuition where he had calculations, courage where he had fear. His reflection in the fountain rippled, distorted by the last drops of rain, and he realized something unsettling. He had been blind, not only to her warning but to life itself. For all his billions, all his control, he had never understood the weight of human compassion until now. Meanwhile, Clara sat in her small quarters that night, staring at the tray of food she had prepared. The mansion outside glittered with opulence, but inside her heart felt heavier than ever. She had wanted nothing but to serve faithfully, to keep the life she'd clawed back under the guise of humility. But now the man she had helped, the man whose fate had rested in her trembling hands, was no longer just her employer. He had become a puzzle she couldn't piece together. Was it guilt? Curiosity? Something else? Suddenly, a knock echoed through the corridor. Daniel's voice, low and hesitant, reached her. "Clara, may I come in?" Her hands froze. She nodded, although he couldn't see it. When he stepped inside, the small room felt impossibly intimate. The air charged with tension neither had experienced before. "I need to tell you something," he began, taking a hesitant step forward. "About me, about this house, about the night you warned me. There's more than you realize, Clara. More than fate, more than instinct. He paused, caught between confession and fear. Clara's chest tightened. Her instincts screamed that something monumental was about to surface. "I wasn't always the man you see," Daniel whispered, his voice almost fragile. "I lost my way once, in ways no one understands. And the thing I'm about to reveal, it may change everything between us." Clara's eyes widened. What do you mean?" He looked at her, the weight of untold truths pressing down. "The man you saved, the beggar you helped that night, he wasn't just anyone, he was me. I had left everything to understand the world, to understand people, and in doing so I returned in disguise." Silence fell like a stone. Clara's mind reeled, her hands gripping the edge of her cot. The man she had pitied, the man she had shown mercy to, was the billionaire she served. Her heart raced, a blend of disbelief, betrayal, and something unnameable, respect, perhaps even awe. Daniel continued softly, "And yet, the one who truly taught me the value of life, the meaning of humanity, wasn't a boardroom strategist nor my family. It was you, Clara. You saved me before I understood I needed saving." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't speak. Words could not capture the storm raging within her. Anger, relief, sorrow, and the faintest glimmer of understanding. She realized that all along, the mansion had been more than walls and wealth. It had been a test, a mirror of everything that mattered and everything that had been lost. And in that quiet, rain-scented room, both Clara and Daniel understood that their lives were now irrevocably intertwined, bound by secrets, fate, and a lesson neither would ever forget. Perfect. Here's scene 4, final 800 words, the climax and resolution. It ties all threads together. Clara's courage, Daniel's redemption, the family's confrontation, and the emotional closure. Cinematic, immersive, emotional, realistic, and no subheadings. The morning sun struggled through gray clouds, casting a pale light across the grand estate. The mansion, glittering yet hollow, seemed smaller somehow, as if it too had been waiting for justice to arrive. Clara moved quietly through the corridors, her hands steady despite the storm of emotion inside her. She had made a choice the night before. She would no longer be invisible, no longer a ghost wandering the halls of her own past. She carried her few belongings, not out of despair, but with the dignity of a woman reclaiming what was hers, not possessions, but her soul. Daniel met her in the foyer, his expression unreadable yet full of sincerity. He had sent his staff away, the house empty, but for the two of them a stage set for truth. "Clara," he said softly, his voice almost breaking, "you have no idea how much courage it took for you to save me. To do what you did, knowing nothing about me, nothing about the consequences." She turned, her eyes meeting his, steady and clear. "Sir, I didn't save you because of who you were or because of your wealth. I saved you because it was the right thing to do. That's all anyone can do." Her voice held a quiet strength, a force that no amount of money or influence could ever command. He swallowed, realizing that he had spent decades chasing power and fortune, Yet it had taken a poor maid's warning to awaken his humanity. And then, the inevitable confrontation arrived. The black cars rolled up the driveway, his parents stepping out with the cold precision of those who had always believed themselves above consequence. Their eyes swept over Clara, then Daniel, judgment etched in every line of their faces. "Daniel," his mother began, voice sharp and brittle. "What is the meaning of this? Why is a servant in this house behaving as though she has authority?" Clara stood taller than ever, her chin lifted. "I am not here to behave, madam," she said, voice clear. "I am here to speak the truth." The words echoed through the marble hallways, more powerful than any scolding or wealth. Daniel's father frowned, his usual pride faltering under the weight of her presence. "I warned him," Clara continued, turning to Daniel, "because someone had to. And someone had to remind him that life is fragile, that decisions can't be measured by money alone. You who claim to run empires have forgotten what it means to value the human heart." Daniel's mother laughed lightly, coldly. "And what right does a poor maid have to lecture a heart? You see, Clara, this house belongs to wealth, to legacy, not to sentiment." Clara's eyes flashed, her voice unwavering. "This house may belong to wealth, but humanity belongs to no one. And if wealth is blind to it, then it is worthless." For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Daniel felt something shift within him. Not fear, not triumph, but a deep, undeniable recognition of the truth she spoke. He stepped forward. "Mother, father, everything you value can be rebuilt, bought, or sold. But the lessons she has taught me cannot. Clara saved more than my life. She saved my humanity. And I will not forget it." He handed her a small envelope heavy with consequence. Inside was the deed, transferring ownership of the estate to a charitable foundation in Clara's name. Not because he wanted her to serve him, but because he wanted the world to understand the power of courage, integrity, and kindness. Clara stared at the envelope, tears forming in her eyes. She had never dreamed of wealth, never desired the trappings of power. Yet here was the universe acknowledging her heart, not her bank account. She did not speak, only nodded, the smallest, most profound gesture of understanding passing between them. His parents' faces had gone pale, their legacy suddenly fragile against the weight of morality. Daniel watched as they retreated, powerless, realizing that their empire meant nothing without conscience. The mansion, once a gilded prison, felt lighter somehow, as though the walls themselves had been cleansed by the force of her truth. Days later, Clara opened the doors of the small cafe she had dreamed of for years. The bell chimed softly, a song of freedom and rebirth. She moved with grace behind the counter, her hand still bearing the faintest scars of labor, but her eyes now shone with serenity. The streets buzzed with life, laughter spilling from the small establishment like sunlight through the clouds. Daniel appeared at the doorway, silent at first, observing. He had not come to reclaim her, nor to beg forgiveness, only to witness the life she had earned and nurtured. He placed a small envelope on the counter, a gesture, not a demand. Clara's gaze fell upon it, another symbol of his respect, his acknowledgement of the lessons she had taught him. "You taught me what wealth truly means," he said softly, his voice carrying more weight than any fortune. "Not money, not power. You." She looked at him, tears forming but not spilling in bitterness. She nodded, a soft, graceful acknowledgement of his growth and a quiet closure for her own heart. There was no need for reconciliation, no need for promises. They had both been changed in ways that money could never measure. The bell chimed again as he stepped away, the wind catching her hair, sunlight finally breaking through the lingering gray. Laughter and warmth filled the cafe, a testament to resilience, integrity, and the quiet triumph of a heart that had known nothing but loss yet refused to surrender to it. And in the distance, the mansion stood still, its gilded halls now holding a new meaning, not of ownership or empire, but of the power of one courageous soul to illuminate the lives of many. Two worlds, once divided by pride, wealth, and circumstance, had found their measure, not in gold but in grace,